And welcome back to another episode on my channel. This video is going to be done really quickly because if you've noticed, it is the same camera, same stuff going on. The only difference is the lighting, because I moved the light over from the last video. I'm still uploading the video before this as I'm talking, but I wanted to talk about another. It's nothing to do with AuthorTube or anything like that. It's just another thing that popped in my head that I didn't have time to talk about at all. Creative criticism and criticism in general, and then also in this one, how do you write, your stories and all that? What approach do you do? So let's dive into the creative criticism. So the creative criticism problem that I've seen in writing courses and communities is if you're writing something near and dear to your heart, when someone attacks it, you go on the defensive and start ridiculing the creative criticism when it's designed for you to take the advice and try to help make the story better. And that's the good part about a lot of the writing community is not everybody's story is great. Not everybody is there to belittle your story. We're all coming from the same area. We have a story we want to tell, and we don't know, if we're more, what's the word I'm looking for? I hate when I'm trying to do this off the top of my head. We're very self-conscious about the stories. So I feel that a lot of us can relate on that type of a ground. However, when I went to college for writing, we did a creative writing course. It was, to get into it, you had to at least do writing 1 and 2. And then the other courses would open up for you. So this one, it was designed so you could write a story, but you had to be critiqued by the classroom. So the two main projects we had was you had to write a short story, send it in, like you had to email it, and then the teacher emailed it to everyone else. You had to read the story ahead of time and present questions when you went into class. So there was 2 ways this would go. You could be the reviewer. I'm just gonna make it that simple. You could be the reviewer or the reviewee. So the reviewer was basically, before class, we would get the stories like 2 days before class, because we had it like Tuesdays and Thursdays. So like Monday we would get group 1, and then Wednesday we'd get group 2. And you would read all their stories. They were very short, so they wouldn't take like a long time to read. But you had to sit there, read the story, and ask questions in class the next day. Or if you were lazy, like most of the people, you'd read the stories real quick before class, and then you'd ask questions. I would read like half of them, because we'd do like, I think 4 kids a class out of a class of like 20. So it was like 5 weeks of this stuff. So we would have to read the story, and then you had to pick apart the story. You had to pick apart the story and find out what's wrong with it, because not everybody had, great stories. I can remember one of them off the top of my head was a kind of country love story, but I couldn't get really invested into it. And that's kind of the problem I have with young adults, is I can't get invested in some of that stuff. But I grinned my teeth for a majority of the reading, and we would sit there at class, and you had to tell the person why their story was bad in the sense of mechanically. So when we were doing that, we had to we could not at all say your story sucks, because it had no credible educational purpose at all, because you're not telling the person how to get better. You're not telling them why it's bad. Even if you were to say that sentence and then back it up with information, you lose all credibility on it, because you know the person's trying. You know the person is actually trying in this story. there are worse stories out there, and which have been published, that are bad, that horribly bad. So we had to go. At least that was the teacher's rule. We had to at least be somewhat lenient with being critique. God, my words, critical about it. So when you were reviewing, you had to basically ask questions that were bothering you. And a lot of times it was like plot holes or character motivation. So when I did a short story in that class, I just did, I was trying to do animation, and I had like an animated show idea that I wanted to do for like Adult Swim or Comedy Central, depending on who got me first. So I just wrote a script real quick, and my problem was just like the plot kept switching in and out. So I completely understood all the criticism. People liked the characters though, which was really great because again, I'm good at writing dialogue. I really am. I could convince people that people are awesome in a story, not because it's like they have the quippy one-liners, just how they talk. Like in a situation, they're not like, "Oh no, they're going to eat me. What am I gonna do?" It's like they have a fucking fun time making fun of the situation, or they just can't stand what the hell's going on. So that was the one thing about my short story, was my dialogue was really good. So that one, I believe I got like a C on for that project. So I did get a lot of stupid shit. Like I had a lot of people who were like, "Oh, I just didn't like the story at all. Didn't like the characters. Didn't like the setting." And again, these were people that didn't like me in general because I had a lot different points of view. So I can't blame them, but I can't hate them at all. So we moved on to the next one, which I do have this story still, and I hold on to it the most because the next part of the story is we did flash fiction. Flash fiction was basically our somewhat final. It was like a sub-final because it was that plus something else. So basically, if you don't know what a flash fiction is you have to do a story with X amount of words, and I believe our teacher had it set to about 300 words or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head completely. So the whole point of the story was I wrote, and it's kind of funny because I wrote this about 2 hours before class because I was just completely brain stumped on the idea of how to actually write this story. So I write the impossible solution, which was kind of my romantic sci-fi thriller. I don't want to know if it's saying thriller, but I structure it like a play. So it's basically following the man who has no name. The woman has a name. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but they basically go on a date. She dies. He rewinds time, and every time he keeps rewinding time, she keeps dying. So in the course of the short story, she dies, I believe, twice, and then the third time, at the very end, he switches places with her and says, "Okay, your turn." Because he puts in so much dedication to save her life, would she do the same thing for him? So I felt like no one would really care about it because I was still broken up about the short story project that we had, because I felt that even though some of the criticism was constructive, some of it was, like I said, people just didn't like the characters, didn't like the story at all, didn't really help me at all. The most I got from it was my plot was moved, like the areas were changing constantly because I was doing like players playing D&D, and it kept changing between the D&D and the actual thing. And they're like, well, maybe you should just drop the real world aspect. It just kept them all in the game speaking out in and out of character. I'm like, oh, that would have been better. Yeah, that's a good point. So so when I got to class for the flash fiction for that day, I basically was shocked. A lot of people liked it. Again, really good with just character dialogue. I had them in like one setting. It was like a pier, like a beach and a pier and a nice ice cream parlor type place, and nothing really exciting happened. It's just dialogue the whole time, and people were invested in the story. And after everyone was done talking about it, not really having a problem with it, I looked at them like, "Are you serious? You guys actually enjoyed this? I wrote this like really quickly. I'm actually ashamed, but I'm actually shocked that you guys liked it. I'm okay." And I've held on to it for such a long time, and I have it on my Wattpad page. I still have it privated because I haven't flipped it over because I left it on private because I knew no one was going to read it. So that was the time I had to deal with criticism in college, and it's taught me to actually critique stuff a lot better in the sense of writing. Usually when it comes to critiquing, I'm not picky on the type of story. I just ask not to do certain stories, because no matter what I read, I'm super picky as a regular reader. Now, the reason why I say that is I like reading sci-fi, but that doesn't mean I read all the sci-fi out there. I like old school stuff like H.G. Wells that I can enjoy. Is it Philip H. Dick? I'm so tired. I like Blade Runner, iRobot, Isaac Asimov. That stuff I'd read. But still, it's like certain stuff. It's like pulling teeth for me. Ernest Clyde, I read his stuff because I love the 80s. Even though I grew up in the 90s, I still love like certain things from the 80s. Still was pulling teeth when I was trying to read The Hobbit. Same thing goes for Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. But then again, with that stuff, it's kind of like, all right, this is an enjoyable read. Watchmen was the same way. But a lot of times I usually burn through comic books really quickly. And it's just, I lean more to comic books more than books, because books, it's kind of hard to pull me in. Like Harry Potter, for the longest time, was always hard to pull me in. Like the only one I think I ever read was Chamber of Secrets, and that was it. And this comes from the fact that I can't read, which I think I already said that in the first video. If not, tell me in the comments below, and I'll elaborate that story. But nevertheless, with creative criticism, I've learned that, especially in like the community, like we all have that same playing ground of being self-published or trying to get a publisher. And getting a publisher nowadays is kind of, it's ridiculous, because even if you were to go self-publish, you're not hot shit. We all can be Amazon bestsellers, and it sucks. I mean, it's not the Wild West where we can just find gold instantly and become rich. It's just, we're one person out of a million, and we're trying our best to stick our head out and be like, hey, okay. A lot of people want to be the next J.K. Rowling, and with J.K. Rowling, it's kind of a flash pan. She kind of lucked out. I mean, to me, J.K. Rowling is my generation's George Lucas, because she created a whole universe like Star Wars for my generation, and being a part of the whole Harry Potter phenomenon was great and fun, and we're never gonna get that ever again. Yeah, I said that because Fantastic Beasts isn't great, but we have to kind of hang on to it. I guess she's kind of in that prequel stage that George was in, but I digress. So when we did creative criticism in college, I learned growing more into the writing that, you know, I have to have that fair outlook. And a lot of times I'm very blunt about my answer, but I'm not like, it's fucking horrible. I mostly will look at the situation and be like, okay, why are the characters doing this? Where is this going? And then why are the characters talking about this if this is going on? So a lot of the times I try to focus on what the characters are doing and what they're saying more than the background or the setting, because that's kind of it's kind of where I'm strong at, and I try to focus on that more than the background. So I tend to not critique or review people's work because I don't feel comfortable doing that stuff. But I know there's something I can't do, and I can admit that, but I cannot read other people's stories because of that. Because I don't want to sit there, read it, and then they expect, was it good? Was there anything wrong with it? Because I can't tell. Because even I, when I'm looking at my stories, I know I can't tell what's wrong with it. And I've sat there for, I think we're up to 5 years with the first book with Flux, and I still look at it and I'm like, I know there's something wrong with it, but I can't see it. It's not as much as the plot, because I know the plot in that one's a little messy. It gets better. It's just there's not much going on in the first book. 2 kind of puts the stuff together, and then 3 kind of explodes everywhere, which has been a freaking nightmare writing. I thought it would be easier since it's just straightforward. I know where I'm supposed to go, but it's like, what can I add? So I got to about 15 minutes of me talking about the critiquing, so let's dive into the other part of this video, which was how do you guys write your stories? So I have a couple things under my desk today, so I'm gonna grab these real quick. So I like writing on composition books, and the funny thing is this was Flux for the longest time. This was where I wrote majority of the story. And then I did a little bit in Relativity, which you can tell, like, they're all damaged and all that, because I put them downstairs and they got somewhat water damage. So I wrote a little bit of Relativity in that one, and then Velocity, I almost said Flux again. Velocity was strictly just digital because I had gotten to the next part of this show and tell. So I actually got this Lenovo 2-in-1 because I wanted at least small netbook. I call them netbooks because laptops are a little bit bigger until you get to the next part of this video. So I got that to type a couple of books. So I finished Flux on that, and then what happened to that one was, because it was a 2-in-1, it had a bad hinge and it just broke, and the connection to the screen's gone. It will still turn on, but it's not worth it because the processor, I believe, was a Pendulum, and it had 4 gigs of RAM. Because I know I sure as I would not pay for 2 gigs of RAM. That's stupid. But I had that, and I did some small work on it, and I enjoyed typing it a bit. But I'm more of, I'll pick up a pen and write it down, just because I like the feeling of holding a pen and writing down. That's why I had the composition books. But I went from the composition books to the computer because I actually had a manager when I was working overnight rip paper out of my freaking composition book, out of the Flux one. And that's why it says in the Sharpie, like, property of mine, do not touch. Because he was very ignorant and rude, and he knew that was not something you rip paper out of. But because he's a manager, he didn't give a shit. So after that one had blown, I was using my computer, which I'm using now, for a little bit. But I took my tax return money and the money I put on the side to get a Surface tablet. And the only thing about the Surface tablet is when I first got it, I didn't have the type cover, which is the most fucking stupid ass thing Microsoft does, is they don't provide the type cover. I did get the case before the type cover, but I digress. I like using the pen, but I don't write with the pen, and I hate writing with the type cover because the type cover on your lap doesn't work. So I believe I finished Relativity on that one, and then I started Flux, and most of Flux has been done on this computer, my desktop computer that I mostly game on and just edit. So that was kind of the thing about my typing is I gotta be in a certain area for typing, and I hate typing on my gaming computer because I got the clicky keys and all that. With the Surface computer, I can pick it up, close the lid, put it on the side, or if I have to go somewhere real quick, close it up, go somewhere. Like I'll go like to Starbucks or something at Barnes and Noble and sit down for a bit because we're that stupid. I mean, I hate doing that because that's the typical hipster writer thing that everybody does. But sometimes I just go in there just to do it. Any which way, in this video for the Q&A stuff, I guess in the comment section is how do you guys write your books? Do you still enjoy doing it handwritten, or do you guys just strictly type on a computer, type on a tablet? I don't type on a tablet like on the screen as much, or on my phone. I only do it on my phone if it's like I must do it, because I have been like away from it for such a long time and I have a really good idea. Like I'll type on my computer, but I have to go into work, so on my lunch break I'll type on my phone. Then when I go home that night, I'll correct in the computer, because somehow typing it on the phone, the spacing gets completely messed up. But like, how do you convey writing your story? Like, how do you write it down? Do you just do it pen and paper? Do you type it? Do you use a tablet? What apps do you use, or what programs do you use? I unfortunately hate using Microsoft Word, because I'd rather go back to the old days, like Microsoft Word 2013, when it was just goddamn Word and not Office 365, because I can't stand how I can't just own Word and call it a day. I have to pay like $8 a month just to use a program, and I hate the licensing program stuff. I can't stand it. Same thing goes for Adobe, and I have Adobe all broken because I'm not paying so much money for programs I'm not going to use constantly. So I have them, so I can just use them whenever I feel like it. Should do the same thing for Word, but Word actually gets blocked on Windows 10. So, well, there's a couple free programs out there you could use. Yeah, I could do that, but unfortunately, like I said, I have my phone that I type a little bit on that transfers to my computer, so I have that feature. That's the only thing I kind of like about Word, is I can keep updating my cloud and moving the files around. That's the only thing I like paying $8 for out of that, but not using Word for a month. Like, I don't like that idea. I've been rambling on for so long, so I want to know how you guys rate your stories, and what are your thoughts on critiquing stories? Like I said, I'm not the best at it, but I try to look at it with good intentions, I guess. Like I try to look at, like, I know where this person's coming from, but I do see what's wrong with it. How do we fix it? Kind of attitude. Instead of just going, your story sucks, or I don't like your story because it's a young adult story and I can't get invested into the lovers because that's not my kind of thing. That I will admit to, but I will tell that person flat out, like, hey, young adult isn't my thing. If someone's got something like sci-fi, horror is a little hard for me to touch, but I've talked a little bit too long. If you guys have any questions, post them in the comments below. Remember to hit that like button, it helps me out. Plus, I can also tell if you guys really like the content or not of the video. Also, hit the subscribe button. I will try to keep these videos coming as much as possible. Right now, I'm kind of having no job, so this is kind of being the filler of my time, instead of just sitting around doing nothing but writing or playing video games or watch TV and filling out applications to see who will hire me. So, while I'm doing my freelance writing, I'm pretty much going to start building up my YouTube channel and doing YouTube stuff. So, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I still need to figure out a end saying. I hate doing that stuff so much.